What is it like being a Jamaican living in Indiana in the United States? Hi, I'm Xavier Murphy, the founder of Jamaicans.com. And today in Jamaicans to the World, I talk to Eldon Chuck, a Jamaican living in Indiana. Eldon, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right, man. Everything good.
Good, good, good. So, which part of Jamaica are you from?
So originally, salt of the earth. I was born in a little place called Riches in Clarendon, which is for most people the closest town to that would be Spaldings, and
Okay.
from there I took my common entrance there. Actually, passed my common entrance for Knox College, but as you know, Knox is in Spaldings, and most of my siblings were in Kingston. And my mom was in the process, of course, of all my siblings went to schools in Kingston. And my mom was in the process, of securing her immigration to the United States. So I actually moved to Kingston and actually started out transferred to Jamaica College.
What? Whoa!
So I lived in Mona Heights for that year, and boarded out with some people that my mom knew. And my brother was going to Jamaica College, and he actually swam for JC.
Wow.
So I went to Jamaica College, but I only stayed for about a week. And my brother, who happens now to be the Minister of Justice in Jamaica, Delroy, he thought that with everything going on that I might not have enough discipline living off by myself. So he thought George's had a little bit more discipline for me. So I transferred to George's after about a week and a half.
Oh my gosh.
So
You
long
had
story
the
short,
best
that's how I
week.
became a
You,
George's.
you
But by
had
the way, Xavier, your name means a lot because at George's, I was actually in how things are broken up into houses, right?
right, right.
The house I was in at George's was Xavier. It's named after a lot of a lot of the
Yeah,
Jesuits and stuff, Xavier,
yeah, the
Barman, and
Saint
so
Saint
forth.
Francis Xavier is actually where my name came from. My grand uncle was studying to be a Catholic priest, and so that's where that name came from. So yes, there are some ties there. But I was about to say you had the best week of your life, and then I will leave it. I see you have your St. George's shirt in the
Yes,
background, fully representing in your light blue and so fully
yes,
representing. So
yes.
is there a teacher at St. George's that really impacted your life?
Xavier, I think a lot of teachers impacted my life throughout the years. And I hate to go back, but I think most of my impact came from my primary school growing up in the country, where we had your formative years or your primary school years. To be honest, I mean, George's is where you probably meet some of your new friends, and that's where I represented George's in Sunlight Cup in cricket and Colts cricket, as a matter of fact. So JC missed out on me there, Xavier. Um, but there's a teacher there, a father by the name of Father Quinlan, and I remember, when you play cricket and you're somewhat popular. I mean, you think you're on top of the world, and I was a very talkative person. I used to talk in class, and at George's they gave demerits. So if you get three demerits in a week, you get suspended for half a day. And but you
Mm.
also, in those days, you get spanking as well. So you get they take out the cane and they lash you. And I remember they sent me. I was speaking in class three times. I got three demerits, and they sent me to Father Quinlan, and I got a half a day suspension. And what I had to do was I had to mow the soccer field by hand with a push mower. And
Oh.
and then after that, I had to get three lashes. And then my friends were telling me, "Well, don't worry about the lashes. Just put a book inside your pants, and he won't feel it." So I walk into the classroom, into his office, and of course, I think I didn't know it, but I think he saw that I was a little bit padded. So he started to laugh and says, "Mr. Chuck, we will need to remove those books before I give you these lashes." but the real story is that after the lashes, he sat me down and he spoke to me and says, "Listen, you've got some talent. You're doing well in school, but you need to apply yourself a little bit more." And I recognize the truth. I don't think I fully 100% applied myself, but I did apply myself well enough to get 8 subjects in at the time it was an ordinary level
Right,
exams, and today I think it's different. They call it the GSC. So, but
right,
but
right.
that combination of talk and lashing and mowing the soccer field, having my friends watch me from inside the classroom, had a profound effect on me. So to me it was a good life teaching moment, not necessarily a good academic moment per se, because I don't think I was having too much trouble with the academic side. I was just having too much trouble, with the maybe expressing myself in class too
I
much.
hear you. I hear you. I
No,
have a curiosity question now. So, what was the name of the town you said in Clarendon?
it's
Uh,
a town. It's a town called Riches.
okay, Riches. So, do you know Tweedside?
I don't recognize the name Tweedside, but up a little bit of ways from us, there is a place called Belcaris, which happens to be, I believe, where even Elaine Thompson and Johan Blake and those guys came from, maybe
Okay,
200 yards from where I lived.
because Tweedside is where my mom's side is from, and it's a kind of a hole in the wall in Clarendon, past Spalding's. So, I was just curious if you know Tweedside.
No, I don't recognize Tweedside, but
I'm gonna
but
go look up Riches though. I'm
yeah,
definitely gonna go look up Riches and see
and
how
look up.
close it is.
Yeah, look up Rich's Primary too, because Rich's Primary is, when I was going there, we had, the place had no electricity at the time, no running water or anything. But the good news for me was that the pipe was, so my mother had, the typical Chinese shop, right? And across the street was where the pipes were. So you could,
Standpipe, the
yeah,
standpipe.
exactly. So you could run across the street and pick it up, and you see people walking with a bamboo and carrying the 2 buckets and stuff like that. And of
Oh,
course,
the
my grand,
standpipe man.
yeah,
Key.
my grandmother is little short old black lady, right? That
Right.
used to carry the basket on top of her head and balance it while she's walking, right? So you learn these things when you grow up in the country that you wouldn't normally necessarily learn if you grew up in Kingston. And I remember distinctly, Xavier, when I moved to Kingston, people don't realize it. People in the United States don't realize it, but in Jamaica, there's different dialects of patois. So when I first went to Kingston, people would look at me and says, "You're from the country, man," because I talk a different patois.
It's funny. I have a friend that said to me, "You're patois, uptown patois man. That's an uptown patois you talk."
Exactly.
So tell us about the journey to the United States, and if it was, a culture shock when you first came to the United States.
It would, to be honest with you, Xavier, it was more than a culture shock. So I I first came to the United States in 1973. I came up with my mother to spend a summer vacation, right? And that's the first time I left the country, and it was Air Jamaica at the time. And I went onto the Air Jamaica airplane, and my mother wasn't even eating the food, so I ate hers and mine. I thought, man, this is great food, you know what I mean? But she didn't think it was great. What I said, this tasted pretty good. I mean, you grow up, all you're eating these days is just patty and cocoa bread, and now they come on there to give you a little piece of meat and some rice and stuff. It looks pretty good, like you went to the restaurant. So I ate as much as I could. Got out at John F. Kennedy Airport, and I just started to feel sick. My mother's walking ahead. I'm looking around, taking all the sights. I mean, I couldn't believe airports look this nice in the States and everything. And I was just so excited, I threw up all over the floor. So that was my first experience in the United
Welcome, welcome.
United States. So, and guys saw me, and then after that, my brother picked us up and he said, "How's everything?" But I was feeling good at the time, so he says, "What would you like to eat?" I said, "Kentucky Fried Chicken," because that's what I'm. So anyway, and then I realized that Kentucky Fried Chicken in the United States did not taste as good as Kentucky Fried Chicken in Jamaica.
I was waiting on that. I was waiting
Exactly.
on that.
It was a little bit too greasy, didn't have as good a taste. So from there on, anyways, after that summer, I went back with intent, completed my O levels, and I was planning to come back. So I came back in 75. That was the second time. And I was here, and the intent was to go back to Jamaica and do my A levels. And Father Ferris was our headmaster at the time, and his intention, I think my brother spoke to him, and his intention was that I would come back. But while I was here, you start investigating schools, and I'll be honest, I started watching American sports, and I saw where Southern California, I mean, it just looks so nice and golden out there, and they have that maroon color and gold and maroon, and I mean, looks almost Jamaican to a certain degree, but it was nice and sunny, and cheerleaders and the football, the whole pomp and pride. So I said to myself, I think I'm going to go to University of Southern California. So I just started applying, and I applied to them, and I was supposed to go there, accepted. And then Syracuse University contacted me, and we got some scholarship to go there. So I decided I wanted to go to Syracuse. And so I talked to my brother, who I was living with at the time, and he said, no, Syracuse is a good school, you should go there. And so we went there. Now my brother in Jamaica, that didn't realize what I was doing, so he already had gone to Father Ferris and says, yeah, he's coming back to do his A level. So so it was getting a little bit late. So he contacted me and says, when are you coming back to do your A levels? Father Ferris is holding a spot for you in sixth form. I says, well, I'm not coming back. I'm going to Syracuse instead. So we went through a little period of, miscommunication, and probably he wanted me to come back. I wanted to stay. So we went through that. But the fact is, I ended up going to Syracuse. Nice. But I'll tell you, the only jacket I had was my brother, who went to JC, was over here. He was in the Air Force, and he got me one of those green jackets, right, that the Air Force uses. And that's the only jacket I had that I took to Syracuse with me. But that jacket was not enough there. Syracuse.
Not cold. Cowl.
Cold, man. I just had to, man, it cold to the bone.
So fast forward a little bit, because you started out on the Northeast. How did you end up in Indiana? Which, now, if you think about it, you're moving from cold to colder.
Yeah, because Indiana doesn't get as much snow as Syracuse, but Indiana does go through cold spells where it actually gets colder. I mean, it gets really negative. Syracuse stays a little bit higher temperature, but they get snow almost every day because of what they call a lake effect snow coming off the Great Lakes. Indiana is not. Indiana in the Ice Age was just the bottom of a big pond or ocean in the United States. So, but it gets very cold here. I mean, it dips down below zero. So
the journey. How did you? Yeah. So the journey to Indiana.
Geographically, I knew where Indiana was.
Right.
But I really didn't ever see myself moving to Indiana. I mean, I was on the East Coast. I figured if I'm on the East Coast, I might go West Coast or Southwest. So when I graduated from Syracuse, I had a electrical engineering degree. And I spent an extra year in Syracuse because I actually started out in biomed, realized that maybe in biomed, medical or bioengineering, I would only do some research. But I really wanted to work in the industry. So I stayed an extra year, completed my electrical engineering degree, and I got a job with a company called Texas Instruments. So I went into semiconductor design. And as a matter of fact, I'll make this real fast for you. If you know the closed captioning that you see on TV today, that chip was the original chip that I worked on to improve the yield. And at the time, the National Captioning Institute had a contract with Sanyo, which is a Japanese TV brand, and it was only available through Sears. So we used to make a chip that actually would strip that information off one of the hidden TV lines and then place it on a TV where it would be placed, where it wasn't interfering with the image per se. Place it in one of the different corners. So that's where I went. Then when I went to
pioneer, you're a pioneer, my friend. One of the pioneers.
Yes. Wow. So after that, I started not disenchanted. I just thought engineering was a little bit slow. Wanted to do something faster. So I got into marketing and sales. And then Texas Instruments moved me back to Syracuse from Texas, where I worked in one of the sales offices as a technical sales representative, and I stayed there I stayed with Texas Instruments a total of about 13 to 14 years. And at the time, one of my largest customers was GE Consumer Electronics. And in talking to them, they offered me a job. So I moved over to them. And then lo and behold, GE at the point was actually reacquiring RCA that they had owned, probably 30 or 40 years before the government forced them to split. And so they reacquired RCA, and then they cut a deal with a French company called Thomson. And then Thomson basically acquired the consumer electronics business of GE, while GE acquired their medical business. And that's so what they did was, when Thomson acquired it, they then took the headquarters of RCA, which happens to be in Indianapolis, and moved the consumer electronics business to Indianapolis. So that's how I ended up in Indianapolis.
Okay, so via work.
Yes, and I will tell you this, even I was not planning to move. I actually accepted a job with another semiconductor company out in Sunnyvale, California, but to stay in Syracuse because I could travel to Albany, New York, which was where their office was. And because I knew they were moving to Indiana, and I didn't want to move to Indiana. But my boss now wasn't moving to Indiana either. And so he came to me and he says, Eldon, I'm not moving, but the vice president, wants you to potentially take my job and move to Indiana. And I said, well, I hate to tell you this, but I've already accepted a job and I'm not moving either. I was going to tell you, but I thought I had time. So he looked at me basically and says, well, we've got a problem. You need to talk to Bob, who's happened to be our vice president. So I went in and talked to Bob, and long story short, let's be honest, you're a young person, right? I mean, between money, job changes, and
we know how it is. The updates and say, listen, we want you, come, what you need. And you just say, hey, man, do my thing, let's go.
All right. So and even then, Xavier, I wasn't completely convinced in Indiana. So the company sent me and my family out here, on a paid trip, to go investigate for the weekend. Do you like the place, the school system? Would you like to move? They gave me the full package. We'll you don't have to worry about anything. We'll buy your house. We'll pay the expenses and so forth and so forth. So the only caveat is that I took the deal. I'll just stay for at least 2 years. Okay. So I told all my friends that I'll be back in 2 years. As a matter of fact, just to show them how committed I was to coming back, that year I bought this big 8 horsepower Ariens snowblower because I knew I needed a snowblower in Syracuse. And I loaned it to my neighbor, and I says, listen, hold on to it for 2 years. Take care of it because I'm coming back. Okay, to this day, he still has my snowblower. He never offered to pay me for my snowblower.
So talk to me about you get there. What's the people like? Because to an extent, you're moving from kind of urban, big city type deal to, and I don't know if the town, if it's a small town you're in, where exactly, but it's a different, people think United States is just everything is the same, but it's very different in every state. So tell me a little bit about the people and about, what it was like moving from the East Coast to the West Coast and getting into that, the different culture to an extent.
So that's a big change. And I'll tell you, even when you live in Syracuse, you're close. And of course, my family, my brother, and, some of my siblings were in New York. And so to me, culturally, I was in New York, but Jamaica was only, a drive away. I mean, I could get Jamaican food. I could go into the city, whether it's a Bronx or Brooklyn, and you thought you were in Little Jamaica anyway. I mean, it comes in equal to what you would experience in Florida or Toronto. I mean, it's the same, the culture is there. And as a matter of fact, you have more people adopting the Jamaican culture in those places than we trying to adopt the American culture.
Kingston 22. South Florida is Kingston 21. New
Yes.
York is Kingston 22.
And Toronto might even be Kingston, you know, even
23.
bigger. Yes. So,
Yeah.
so I started reading up about Indiana, and they Indiana calls itself the crossroads of America. So when I came to Indiana, I basically looked and says, well, this might be the crossroad, but no Jamaican ever crossed this road. Because I looked around. I mean, if you put, I normally every city I go to be honest, I always look up. It used to be I look up in a phone book. Now, of course, you can just Yelp or Google. I look up for a Jamaican restaurant, and the only place I saw in Indiana was a place called Paddy's of Jamaica. So I went down there to talk to the man and meet him just to say hello because I'll be I started to travel back and forth before I even moved here, and the man, his name was Henry Siong. He was from Ochoria, St. Anne's. As a matter of fact, I used to sell insurance in St. Anne before I moved to the United States, and married his wife who is Jamaican, and they. Long story short, she's actually married to his wife's sister, actually married to a cousin of mine who grew up in Balaclava. But we had lost touch with them, so I didn't even know he was in Indiana. So I came there, but all he made some. He just had a little corner spot, he made some patties and called them patties from Jamaica, and the patties were good. I mean, it was better than when you don't have Tasty or, when I left Jamaica, Juicy was around. It was
Right.
Mother's, Tasty,
Right.
and a couple of small places. And but he made some patties. I said, all right, it's not too bad. It's fresh, he makes them right there. And then he had a couple little pots in the back that he'll make some curry goat, and he made beef stew, but it wasn't stew peas like we're used to it. So the curry goat, I used to have to ask him for some Scotch bonnet to put in there and stuff like that. So it was very Americanized, but it was almost like a home away from home. And it really ties back into how I even got into the restaurant business, but we'll get there. But yeah, so when I came to Indiana was the city itself. If you look at the landmass of the city, Indianapolis, it's actually the 13th largest city in the United States.
Oh, wow.
But because of the land space, because what they've done is the county itself is called Marion County, and it encapsulated this whole space that they call a city. But in fact, the city is a very small city. It's not nearly close to being the 13th largest city in the United States. It's just a landmass alone. So when you look at it, I mean, it was a culture shock. I mean, the most the meat staple here is pork, which is not the biggest staple in Jamaica, right? I mean, we're more goat, chicken, and maybe some beef, but
I heard people, what are the, because they usually say people in the Northeast mind their own business. It's not, you're not going to get the, and again, I don't mean to stereotype, but that's typically what you hear, in the New York, Syracuse, those places. And in the mid states and so on, people are more friendly,
Yes. So Indiana is a very flat state, right? When you drive through Indiana, it's more cornfields or wheat fields. So there's a lot of farming that goes here. The people are very, 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 very nice people. They're very helpful, willing to help. I would say it's probably the thing that strikes me the most was we had young kids, and it was a fantastic place to raise kids. The education level is very good. We've got some great universities here. Of course, everybody's heard of Indiana University, Purdue University, and Rose-Hulman University is one of the best engineering universities in the States. It's close to Chicago. I mean, it's only 3 hours away from Chicago.
Okay.
And so it's not as isolated as people think. It truly is a crossroads, and I think the makeup of Indiana is changing significantly. I mean, I think there's a lot more Asian. There's a lot more Indians from India moving in, and of course the African Americans is also making up a bigger part of it. So So the
Very
identity.
diverse. Very
Yes,
diverse.
exactly. No, it's still a very conservative state, right? I mean,
Right.
I
Right.
would say, not to get into politics, but Republicans, dominate the state of Indiana more so than Democrats. And but I would say the Republicans here, um,
Well,
you,
we're not going to get into the.
no,
Oh,
no, no. I don't want to get into the politics too much, but I would say for the most part, they're salt of the earth Americans, kind of,
right. Right. Right.
moderate. I mean, yeah,
So,
it's nothing that
so
we can deal with.
good, good. So I'm going to pivot back to talk food, and I know you have a Jamaican restaurant there. Tell us about how that came about, first of all,
So
and also I am sure you get the folks that have never tried Jamaican food before, so you have heard some real interesting comments. So I'd love to hear one of those interesting comments, but tell us how you got started opening a Jamaican restaurant there.
So the thing is, in 2012, my daughter was just going into high school, and I have four kids, and three of them are much older. They moved from Syracuse with me, and they finished. They came out here, finished middle school, high school, and college here. As a matter of fact, just to show you a different tie to Xavier, my two older daughters actually got soccer scholarships to go to Xavier University in Cincinnati. So Xavier is all over me. Okay, I should really be wearing that big X on my. So they saved me some. Xavier's actually saved me some money. Xavier. So in any case, my last daughter, who's 14 years junior to the last of the three, she was going into high school, and because I used to coach soccer to the other ones, I never really spent that much time with her per se, because she was more into swimming, and I'm not a big swimmer. I swim to save my life. That's about it. So I wanted to spend a little bit more time, and I was just traveling. With the old job, I was traveling. I was spending probably 6 months a year in Southeast Asia, just traveling around.
Wow.
So I decided that we were going to take a step back, and I resigned from the other job, and just decided to take a break, somewhat semi-retired. I mean, and spend some time, taking her to her swim lessons and so forth, and not lessons, but swim, competitions and
Meats
so.
and yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
and I started taking golf a little bit more serious. I was playing probably 5-6 days in the morning, and got down to where my handicap was about a 4, and it was just a highlight of my golf career, right? And so, but I was getting a little bit antsy. What else do I do? I mean, the people at Costco knew me by first name because I used to walk in there so much. So I decided we didn't really have a good Jamaican restaurant in anywhere per se in Indiana, much as Indianapolis, which is kind of the largest city in Indiana. So I lived in a little town called Carmel, which is a little bit north of Indianapolis, and I opened. For lack of a better name, I sent it to my nieces and stuff. I said, "What do you think of these 4 choices?" And we ended up with Jamaican Reggae Grill. So, and the intent was to play some music, have a little spot where Jamaican and West Indian people could come and hang out. Because the typical Jamaican restaurant, let's be honest, it's never normally in the best part of town. They normally only have stand-up tables. You buy your food, you either stand there and eat it real quick, or you take it out and go eat it at home. So I just wanted a little place to relax, but I didn't want it too big. And I started out just wanting to open a patty shop. And but most people in Indiana didn't even know what a patty was.
I was about to say that.
Yeah, they didn't know what a patty was. So I had to make food. So I
you,
made.
you
So,
need a Jamaican community to if you're gonna sell patties.
exactly. Otherwise, you'd go broke, right?
Yes, yes.
So I started doing like jerk chicken and jerk pork, and some curried goat and some curried chicken and some brown stew chicken. I figure that's the most popular thing, and of course I got into stew peas and oxtail because Jamaicans and West Indians want that as well. So we started out, and the thing just got bigger as it got closer to completion. The scope got bigger. And lo and behold, we had the Jamaican Reggae Grill. And I thought, okay, I'll do this for about 4 years and either close it or sell it or something like that. But it just started to grow. I mean, astronomically, the things started to grow. I mean, people were just dying for the food. And not only Jamaica, as a matter of fact, I'd say we probably get more Trinidadians around here than Jamaicans, to be
Oh,
honest with you.
really?
Yeah, but I mean, we had a bunch of Jamaicans, with a bunch of Trinidadians, with Barbadian, Bajan people. And surprisingly enough, I mean, of course, the African American, they had Jamaican food before, and they started to migrate here. Some couldn't believe that I was from Jamaica, because their view of Jamaica was, was a black man, and they didn't realize, I had to teach people out of many one people, that type of thing. And people don't realize that Jamaica, despite all the little troubles that we may have, race is really not big of an issue in Jamaica, because we're kind of an integrated society in Jamaica now, between Chinese and mixed Chinese and so forth. So when I tell people that I did my DNA test and I'm actually 13% Cameroon and 13% Togo, because most Jamaicans are from West Africa, right? If you unless you came from China, okay?
Right.
But
Yeah.
with me being a mix of Asian and African, just my skin color wouldn't indicate that, but I grew up in a place in Riches where I was the only one like this. Everybody else was
right.
Was
don't get me started on the DNA, because that's it. I'm one of them that's deep into that type of stuff, and love that stuff.
Yeah, well, but we convinced people that this was real, and it was, and the Jamaican people come in would basically said, yeah, this is a real stuff. So we have
how many years? So it's 2012.
Yes, 2012. So it's been, about pretty long time, right? It's almost.
Wow.
Well, to be honest with you, we opened the restaurant in 2015. The planning started in 2012, because I'd started a little software company with some other people that we sold, and then in 2015 is when we opened. So we're 9 years into the deal.
Well, congratulations on it. So what's the interesting comment you have heard from a non-Jamaican on some of the food? Give us a good one.
So at first,
right,
some people over here didn't even know what the oxtail is, right? But the most confusing thing, to be honest, was patties, right? Because in Jamaica we know it as patties. And I think because of some legal thing that Jamaica had with McDonald's, we have to call it Jamaican beef patties, and we can't call it beef patties, right?
Yes,
we have to call it Jamaican beef patties. But people would come in basically and says, "Why would I pay $3 for a burger patty, man?" I had to explain to them the whole deal. And then, so what we did was we shifted it so that people could see me start making the patties, and then that would intrigue them, and they would come in and see me making the patties and stuff, which I learned in Toronto from a man who was actually born in St. Elizabeth.
Wow.
He taught me how to make it.
He give you a secret. You give because
he give me the secret. I mean, I gave him a little bit of money, but he give me the secret.
Because I know people that they will close the restaurant and they're not giving away their patty secret. They're like, no way I'm giving away my patty secret. So
it's the biggest secret, right? I mean, if you look at Juicy is going to become a big company one of these days. Tasty is going to become even a bigger company, but they decide not to expand into the United States per se. But Juicy's are expanding, and I think I think Juki and his kids will probably make it very big.
Yeah, they're coming. So let me ask you, in terms of, did you have anyone that walked in very skeptical of Jamaican food, and then maybe a couple weeks you saw them come back and they kept coming back?
Even today, Xavier, we have that. But I will tell you, we have the reason why I can't even get out of this business until I find somebody to take it over is a mere fact that if you look at our Instagram page, and we're not very, social media savvy per se, we could do a much better job. But even if you look at a simple thing as our Facebook or our Instagram page, you will basically have 600 followers, talking to us and stuff like that. So we're temporarily closed right now because the city bought the shopping center that we were in, and they've knocked it down. But the city is actually saying, listen, we want you to come back. Because we don't, we want you to come.
You're that popular.
Yes. Wow. So they've asked us, that we can go someplace else, but we need to come back to Carmel, and they're saving a spot for us.
Wow.
And we get 600. So we're working doing some guest restaurant at a major drug company here in Indianapolis, where the people love us. Everybody there keep asking us, when are you reopening? The other day, I put an ad out because we needed to hire some people to support that endeavor, and everybody thought we were reopening, and so we had like 150 people. Great, where are you reopening? We want to come back. And I mean, but just to show you, I mean, even now we have people that call us up for catering. As a matter of fact, we have a lady. She just sent me a message. She wants me to cater her wedding in Asheville, North Carolina, because she used to live here, loved the food, moved to Asheville. She's having a private, ceremony for 60 people, and asked me if I would come down and come cater it for her. So she's got to be a good friend, so I might actually do that for her.
Nice.
So and by the way, we were they did, they have these publications, and I can't remember the name of this publication. It's in where they actually had us as the #1 Jamaican restaurant in Indiana, and the top 50, and in the top 50
Wow, in the States.
in the United States. And
Congratulations, man.
come on, and
Congratulations.
this is something that I didn't even consider, that would be this big. And at one point when we were open, Yelp actually rated us as the #1 restaurant in Indianapolis, and we were top 50 in the whole state of Indiana of all the restaurants, the steakhouses, and everything.
Nice.
And here we were just a little casual, we're just catching a little place somewhere in the corner.
So let me ask you this: with a restaurant, you're seeing the Caribbean community. How have you seen the Caribbean community grow there in Indiana from when you first moved there to now?
Oh, it's been huge. I mean, before, when I moved here, I could tell you that I probably knew 3 Jamaican people, and I probably didn't know any Trinidadian and no Barbadian, nobody from the West Indies, as a matter of fact. Most of the only immigrants that I saw around here were primarily Mexicans, Hondurans, or El Salvadorans, because they work in the service field, whether it's painting, roofing, construction, or whatever. So you get to meet these people.
Right.
Never really. So and as I branched out, I started to know this guy who would fix my car. He's a Jamaican guy. We call him Dread.
Right.
And he would fix my car, but he didn't really have a garage. He'd either come to your place or you go to his place, that type of thing. And then once I opened the restaurant, it's like you open the floodgates, because now Jamaicans had a place to go to where they could go sit down, have a meal, instead of, when they're sick and tired of cooking. I'm of the opinion that all Jamaicans can cook. That's why we don't starve in Jamaica, right? It's not the fact that we're a poor country. But so everybody would cook, but on the weekends, they come out and
so you have seen just an expansion of the community and gotten to know a lot of people, is what it seems like.
Huge West Indian people in general, but Jamaicans, Trinidadians, and Bajan. And so, and I'll say this, and maybe this would have come up in our conclusion anyway. Working 35 years in the corporate world, right, and working 9 years in the restaurant business, where it's a little bit more personalized, I will tell you that most of my friends that I currently have, that will be my friends until probably the day I die, have been since I was in the restaurant business. So you kind of meet more people who you can converse with in a very casual and get to know them better, versus in the corporate world where you think you know these people, you work with them every day, but when things changes, it's all right.
I had a friend that had I have a friend, sorry, that had a ice cream shop, and unfortunately it's closed. But his best part of his career, he said, was having that ice cream shop. Yes. He said I think it was about 5 or 6 years he had it, and he was like, that was the best time of my life, the best career. He had multiple careers, retired. He has multiple, but he said that was the best time of his life. He'll never forget it. The friends he has made there, But let me not carry on. Cost of living. Let's talk cost of living. What's the cost of living like out there in Indiana?
So if you look at cost of living, right? Cost of living typically is driven by by home prices. And food pricing may go up or down depending on which state you live in, but over a period of time it stabilizes because you figure out distribution gets better, and eventually if you have a better price here, it will eventually spread someplace else unless there's higher taxes. So cost of living is primarily driven by house prices. And the cost of living in Indiana is very, very, I would say it's very low compared to the rest of the United States. It's definitely lower than than the coast, right? East Coast or West Coast.
Yeah.
And Florida went through, a housing boom, and, where they came out of a lull where you could have bought a house in Florida on credit card. And now today, I mean, you can't even buy a house in Florida because you want a loan to pay.
Be a multimillionaire. You need to be a multimillionaire to do that in some places now,
Yeah, so, I mean, I know these little 3-bedroom, 2-bath places, say in Pembroke Pines. I mean, if you bought it, maybe 30 years ago, you probably paid $35,000 for that house, and today it's $600,000 for that same house, right?
Everywhere.
Over the past 5 years, it doubled in price. So
crazy.
So you won't find it in Indiana. In Indiana, you'll find. I would say housing prices in Indiana is still, for new build, it'll be somewhere below $250 a square foot. You can buy an existing home for probably $210 a square foot or something like that, which you won't be able to find too many places.
You won't find it. So if I was to visit Indiana and you said there is either an event, maybe, I know some of these places have huge fairs or huge things. It may be an event. It may be a place that you say you got to see this, or it may be just a lake, it may be a sunset, it may be an historic place. Where do you say, Xavier, if you visit, either go visit this or come at the time of this event? Because this, to me, and it's your personal opinion, and you don't have to do the tourist thing, it's your personal opinion. So this to me is an amazing thing that happens in Indiana, or an amazing thing you can see in Indiana.
The biggest event in Indiana is the Indy 500, and the Indy 500 is it's an event that you will get people from all over the world that comes there, because it has such a tradition where even for the Formula One crowd, which is very big across the world, will come to Indiana to experience it at least once or twice. And it's amazing to me. But growing up in Jamaica, as you well know, car racing, motocross racing is very, very popular. But you don't realize how popular car racing is across the world until you go to a place like the Indy 500. And I had a good experience. I've been there probably maybe 4 or 5 times. A couple of times I've been as a volunteer, and it's amazing to me when you go there and you sit in the crowd. Or one time we did it as a fundraiser for our girls, in soccer. And it's amazing when you're standing there selling hot dogs and burgers, and you hear 10 different languages from 10 European countries, right? Come on, people from France, people from the Netherlands, people from Italy, and all wearing exactly, all wearing the Ferrari outfit or the Red Bull outfit. And these are all Formula One fans that come to, because Indy 500 is known as a mecca. That's where drivers in the past used to come to prove themselves. And
okay, all right. So if I come, when does it? When, I don't remember. When does it happen?
It's right around the Memorial Day, like weekend. So you come in, and just make sure you bring your headgear, because it's loud.
It's loud.
when they break going into the corner, it is deafening. Okay.
All right.
But it's a good experience, because what you see is that you have these huge fields that people have been camping out in for 4 or 5 days waiting to get in, and it's a huge event.
Definitely put it on the calendar. So Eldon, thank you for sharing your experience of living in Indiana with us. Question: you land in Jamaica, whether it be whichever airport you land in, you get off the plane, get out the airport. What is that first thing you're doing? Whether it be Some people say it's a dip in the water. Some people say I'm drinking coconut water. Some people says I'm getting a patty. Some people say I'm going to this place to eat something. And for some people, it's like I'm just going home to my mom's meal or somebody's meal. What is that for the thing you're yearning and the first thing you're doing once you get out the airport?
Okay, so it has changed a little bit, and I'll try to make this quick. It has changed a little bit because I used to yearn for the fruits. I mean, I haven't had, a lot of the fruits that I normally have in Jamaica. I used to travel to the Far East in Southeast Asia. So Thailand is the only place that came close to Jamaica in terms of the fruits and stuff like that, where you can get a sweet sop or anything like that. So I miss that type of stuff. But if I land at Manly, I mean, the first thing we probably will do is pick up some kind of chicken, right, and some coconut water. If I land in Montego Bay, we figure out we're probably heading back to Kingston or Ocho Rios, so we want to stop at Scotches for some jerk fish or some soup or some manishwash or something.
Okay.
But the one fruit that I'm really missing that I have not had, and people, I hope people can see me some, is a neeseberry. I'm had a neeseberry forever.
You wouldn't want to know. I had naseberry last week.
Man,
you wouldn't want to know.
I tell people that neeseberry looks like sugar, tastes like sugar, and you can't stop eating them.
Oh, I just washed that thing and the skin and everything. It's just full on.
All right, man. When Richard and I come visit you, you better have some neeseberry.
Well, Eldon, thank you again. Now, here's what I usually end. I usually ask how the people greet, or say goodbye in the state or the country. But it's America. All right. So it's going to be the typical greeting. So if your friends were to say, what is that Jamaican term? This is a new one I'm breaking. If your friends were to say, what's that Jamaican term you use the most, right? Not a bad word, no, Eldon. No. Which one? Which term would they say you use the most?
No, I would say, the word respect is used the most.
All right.
When people leave in, it's like, respect boss or respect man. We'll see you later or something like that. It's always...
All right. So we'll close it out this way. Eldon, respect my brother.
Respect, brother. We'll take care and blessings.
Blessings. Show us some love now. Hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell. That way you don't miss a video.